So again, now to conclude today, I'm going to ask Rebecca Hawk and Jennifer Brundage to come here and to give their final feedback. We invited them to be our rapporteurs. The idea is that they may give us some ideas for, from the highlights of today, some suggestions maybe for actions from their perspectives. And so I'll give you very briefly a background for each one of them. Rebecca Hawk is a director of community education and English language programs at Framingham State University. She has worked as an environmental policy analyst representing the interests of Native Americans on air and water quality issues. She is also a doctoral candidate in law and public policy at Northeastern University. Her thesis is entitled, As It Is on Earth, So It Has Become in Space, an evidentiary approach to understanding the philosophical basis of a problem of orbital debris. Talking about the whole person. The second rapporteur, we heard from Jennifer earlier this morning, but I didn't give you a little bit of her background. Jennifer has been with the Smithsonian Institution for over 20 years in a variety of roles, serving first as an educator at the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum, which is a wonderful museum. Since 2006, she has been a national outreach manager in Smithsonian affiliations, managing over 50 of the institution's strategic partnerships with museums and universities, including the partnership the Smithsonian has with FSU. So please, I think Rebecca will speak first, but yeah, you can do that. Oops.
A lot of people are trying to do that to me sometimes. That's all right. So it's quite an honor to be here, rubbing shoulders with you all and listening and to learning from these speakers. And I feel challenged at the request that I might be part of the rapporteur to report back to you or to help you synthesize everything that has happened today. I really liked the framework of storytelling, especially I was moved to tears, I'll say, during the Global Oneness Project slides. And I think, Irene, it was your conscious effort to tell the whole story as best we can in one day of starting with the earliest telescope that Dr. Hirsch drew our attention to, and 400 years of development and people saying man can fly. That's what they said. They were leaving the women out, but still. So people can fly, and the spirit and the intention toward that. From my Native American heritage, I'll just like to add to that. And that is, and it's relevant to what was just said here later, is that, gosh, we've been putting Earth and space together since the earliest times. We never separated Earth from space. Earth is in space, as is commonly, more recently talked about, and especially since the amazing Earthrise experience that we had where we went all the way to space and then we looked back and we found Earth again. We renewed our commitment to this beautiful planet Earth. But I'm a descendant of the Haudenosaunee people, and our stories of creation are that we came from space. That's where humans came from. That's something to ponder and put that in the context of what we're talking about today and trying to help everybody think and build a framework around Earth and space together. It's a done deal for me. It's something I understand that people are still trying to make sense of. And I really appreciate everything that everyone has brought to the table today. And Dr. Burback, with the sustainable space politics and the quest for flight, which led to the race to the moon, and the post-Apollo politics, which are still going on, and asking the really important question of, if we go forward now with the current administration, is it something that all people want to do, to move into space, to go back to the moon? Or is this something that is just one person's idea? Those are really important questions for us to ask. And I believe that the storytelling, creating the stories, bringing us back to stories which connect us all to Earth, to ourselves, to space, but also the storytelling helps us see who we are in the midst of all these things that are happening. So I think that is really critical, and it also makes the decisions easier. It helps us prioritize as we start to move forward with actions that we want to take. David Kendall with UN Copias doing the reporting on the very hard work that consensus, he said this several times, it requires a consensus, is incredibly difficult to think of the entire world coming together, that these are the priorities. This is what we're going to do moving forward. And speeding along, Alyssa is still here, and I thanked her for scaring the living daylights out of me when she talked about planetary defense. But I also said, but thank you for telling me what you need. And she said, we need to be able to see more of the sky. And I really appreciate that there are groups of people that are working on this and developing priorities and saying, this is what we need to do, and being able to label and categorize things. And I hope I never see it. But I do really appreciate the effort and the work, and I see how it all fits together in the full story of who we are at this point in history. I'd also like to say, I'm going to be honest and very vulnerable with you. It's a little bit hard to every time indigenous populations and peoples that are connected to the earth are talked about, we go outside of the North American continent, because women were sterilized throughout the 70s here in the United States. Native American populations were segmented. Let's just, do this to get rid of some of them, or test out these drugs and see what happens. It's right here. There are over 400 federally recognized tribes, people who live on reservations, who have treaties with the United States. It's out of the general population's awareness. And in the Northeast, you don't have very many tribes that are actually, holding down a reservation that you can drive onto and that you can see their lifestyles. But if you did, and if you spoke to them, as I did the last time I reported back to the Yakama Nation, which was my adopted tribe in the Pacific Northwest, I met with the tribal elders who wanted to know what was happening in space. And so I prepared materials, slideshows, everything, so that I could inform them of the things that I was researching and what I was studying. And they were so enthusiastic. They were so excited to hear. And when I got to really explaining what was going on with orbital debris, there was silence. There was disgust, but no words spoken, just nodding silence, like only it could be said an Indian can do, where you know exactly what they think without them saying a word. And it was, well, of course, what else could we expect? Of course, they're ruining it. And by they're referring to the dominant culture that has colonized and destroyed their culture, destroyed their environment, which they are at the end of the pipeline trying to fix and getting federal dollars to create fisheries that sustain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I could go on and on. But I am thinking also today about what John F. Kennedy would think at this moment in time. He's the one who said we go into space not because it's easy, but because it's hard. We do these things because they will also help, my paraphrase, they will help gather us together. They will help us bring our energies together so that we can move forward and make good decisions and do the hard things that we need to do. In that speech, which you might want to look up, I think it's 1962, at Rice, you look up the Rice speech, he he condenses time into, if we took the last 50,000 years and we put it into 5,000 or 50 years, this is all that has happened. And he talks about how much we've accomplished. So my final thought is how much we've accomplished. And by we, I mean every indigenous person who is now we're looking to for guidance on how we get ourselves out of the mess on Earth. I'm talking about all of the frontierism that has taken humankind into space. I'm talking about everything incredible that we've accomplished. We can fix the sustainability issues. It's about priorities. It's about values. It's about choosing what we want to do, how we want to do it. And it's about getting rid of our egos. Another thing that Alyssa did was bring in that word. I have to look it up because it's a new one for me. Scotomization. And she said, I don't know what it means. I just Googled it on my phone there. It's a psychological term that means mental blocking of unwanted perceptions, blocking impulses and memories that would threaten our ego. She notices, the groups are starting to notice that what we're talking about is it's humans. It's not a technical problem. It's a sociocultural problem. And we have to use the sociocultural tools and understanding we have of individuals, the psychology that we know, to say we got to break this open so we can do it differently as we move forward. So thank you for the word. Thank you for all of the words, all of the stories. And I am happy to turn it over to a woman who works for my museum, because I'm a citizen here and I pay taxes that support this museum, and she's going to tell you some of the great things that they are doing.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks to all of you for such a stimulating day, and I'm humbled by this challenge to try to respond to it. And to start, I'll just give you a few caveats. I am one of 6,000 employees at the Smithsonian, so these opinions are by no means the official ones. However, I have been there a long time, and a lot of what was talked about today, a lot of the themes that I pulled out are things that we talk about every day at the Smithsonian internally. So there was a lot of resonance that I felt. And the other caveat is that I am coming to you with an agenda. I'm just going to put it right out there that I hope that we will continue to be part of the conversation and these kind of important gatherings about the issues that are facing our time. And so the comments that I've pulled out, the kind of themes that I heard today are a little bit in support of that agenda. So one is I completely agree with the panel at the end and Dr. Singh in particular about we have to talk about climate change and talk about it all the time. We are all familiar with the SDGs at the Smithsonian. We're talking about them all the time, and we've decided to jump on this movement, Earth Optimism, which may sound a little bit optimistic and idealistic. Well, I'm sorry, it's ironic, but idealistic it did to me at first. But the idea is that what if we could rally people around hope? What if we could elicit all of those stories of success at every scale from everyone around the world and try to get people engaged and activated around what they can do instead of how catastrophic it is? So just like I will be at Science Night on March 10th, I encourage all of you to join us in Washington, April 23rd through 25th. We'll have a 3-day Earth Optimism Summit where we've invited thought leaders from around the globe, including many, many youth. They have a strong contingent of young people who will be talking about all the different ways that they are addressing climate change. I was struck in particular by Dr. Hirsch and his talk about Humboldtian science, that idea of pure science. And it struck me that, sometimes we talk about that as if there's not enough of a return on investment. And it occurred to me that at the Smithsonian, this is a lot of the science that we do is pure science. But I would argue that while we care, of course, about impact, it's not esoteric at all. Because doing science for pure science means we just don't simply know the impact that what we're doing now is going to have 100 years from now. So our second secretary, Joseph Henry, engaged in citizen science techniques to start the precursor of what has become the National Weather Service. The Smithsonian was an early supporter of experiments in rocketry and flight. And even today, one of our scientists at the National Air and Space Museum is part of the team that moved the rovers around Mars. So we can't know whether the specimens we're collecting today and the science we're doing today is going to, what kind of impact is going to have 100 years from now, but our history suggests that it will. And so I was delighted to hear Dr. Burbank say that there's increasing support for pure science because we invest a lot in it and care a lot about that. Another theme I heard throughout the day was diversity in many different forms. So I had the great opportunity just a couple nights ago to hear Catherine Sullivan speak at the Smithsonian about her new book, Handprints on Hubble. And she reminded the audience that, you know, for every iconic photograph you see of two astronauts, you know, repairing the International Space Station, you have to know that there are about 200 people also focused on that moment, ensuring its success. And so, again, Dr. Hirsch brought up the role of Playtex in the development of the spacesuits. And I just want to say, from the Smithsonian point of view, telling those stories of the other crew members who aren't pictured in that iconic photo is one of the most important things we do. It's something that we're absolutely committed and convicted in doing. And not only do we do that through our ethnically specific museums, but through our Latino and Asian Pacific American research centers, our women's initiative. In many different ways, we are completely committed to making sure that the diversity of stories told includes all of us and is as inclusive as possible. And I think Dr. Wood pointed out that to do that, the team that's doing that research and sharing that knowledge has to be equally diverse, which is another commitment, something that we take absolutely top priority at the Smithsonian. And this leads to, I think, the kind of complex conversations that we are committed to having. I will quote from our strategic plan, and that the Smithsonian is committed to fostering conversations that address complex challenges of national and global import. So, you know, we are not immune to the politics, as Rebecca and Dr. Burbank have mentioned. Literally, we sit in the front yard of Congress, and they are our biggest benefactor. But I would say that our authority comes from the research that we're doing. And I think this is something we share with universities. We simply cannot be equivocal about an issue like climate change. And when you go into the galleries at the Smithsonian, particularly, I'm thinking of our new exhibition on deep time at the National Museum of Natural History, we do not shy away from telling the absolute reality of what's going on and what it can mean for the planet. So I would suggest, as we know and as this series has demonstrated, interdisciplinary approaches to topics like this are absolutely critical to kind of evincing the nuances that we all need to make these decisions. And so while we did that with this series, I would suggest in the future, perhaps we think about inviting our art historians and our anthropologists and the musicians at the Smithsonian, as Dr. Wood said, to enliven and enrich the kind of conversations that we're having from every perspective. And finally, I just, I'll reference Dr. Kendall, who said over and over again, I wish I would have counted how many times in his presentation, cooperation, partnership, collaboration. We know that those are our strongest, those are our strengths as well. We know we derive our strengths from that, and it's also our strengths. And I just wanted to end by sharing a story from that our new secretary, Dr. Lonnie Bunch, recently shared. He was visiting the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory to look at the first ever image we've taken of a black hole, which is an absolutely mind-blowing achievement. But he said the other thing that impressed him was that the image was only made possible by the inspired collaborative effort to get telescopes from around the world pointed for a single moment on a single issue. And I would submit to you that that's a metaphor, really, for the vision that we have of the Smithsonian, that we have to leverage all of our strengths, and importantly, that includes our network of partners, in order to address the complex challenges of our time and to stay relevant. So I'd like to suggest that not only do we want to continue to be at the table, absolutely, in conversations like this, but from our national platform, I hope that in collaboration with our partners, we can set the table and set a bigger table for citizens of all different kinds to come together and debate our collective future. So thank you very much for having me.
Okay, thank you, Rebecca and Jennifer. And I'm here really to close the day. I'm looking at Lisa. Would you like to come and say to my other partner in crime? I mentioned Lisa Eck this morning. She's the leader of the Arts and Ideas Initiative.
Hello, everyone. I know that I'm standing here between you and a lovely reception, and we are, as Vandana said, social beings. So I'll be brief. I just wanted to thank you. I have a thank you. I have a brief takeaway, which I encapsulated into a phrase, and I also want to invite you back. So the thank you has to do with just really marveling at how this has been an amazing extension of our series, the Arts and Ideas series. I'm waving our beautiful brochure here. They're live events, right? It's all about coming in person, hearing voices, really believing in this interaction, that the truth is between us. So today really embodied in such dramatic ways the importance of a series, the importance of continuing a series that's also about access. So we're about being live, and we're also about being free and open to the public. So thank you for sharing your expertise with our students and with my colleagues. And what I took away, besides I filled out my list, I have all my action items filled out. I did my homework and I replied to the website. But what I want to say is I thought a bit about the phrase common good and the tension that the common good has with common sense, and thinking about the two meanings of common sense. Common sense, that's the status quo, that isn't questioned, that gets in the way, and just how deeply we need paradigm shifts, to use Vandana's call to action. But also I felt today that what we were doing was making common sense, right? Sense has to be made. And in listening to one another, I can say I'm an oral learner. So thank you for coming here in person and letting me listen, and now letting me talk, oral in both senses. But yes, today I think we made something in totality that's really empowering. And also common sense, that we have to be in our senses. So I really feel this call to action to what is our relationship to nature. And as a person who studies literature, I put on my action list that I will teach to environmental issues in every course. I already do that mostly, but now I'm going to do it wholly, because examining that, getting past an anthropomorphic point of view, and even just thinking about our students who are in rooms like this under fluorescent lights and not out there playing in the snow, we have to continue that. So the last thing I'll say is to invite you back. Our brochure includes events for the spring. Now you know how to get here on the lovely Route 9. But also you'll notice that our spring series is really focused on social justice issues. It isn't just interdisciplinary by design, but a little bit light on the science. I'm going to miss all the scientific voices. So we need to keep bringing in these debates. So please come when we talk about migration, et cetera, and keep this dialogue going. So thanks again. It was a memorable day, and thank you to Irene.
So thank you, Lisa. Yeah.